Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a classic Barossa Valley Shiraz from the Glaetzer Family winery, and this is Bishop. It's a 2020 vintage, and the winemaker here is Ben Glaetzer. The family started their winery in 1995 when Ben's father Colin set out to produce some really typical wines from the Ebenezer region or sub-region at the north of the Barossa Valley. And in this sub-region you have some quite particular soils. They're free-draining sandy clay loams over a relatively shallow pan of limestone. So you've got quite good water retention in the limestone, but the situation tends to force the vines to send their roots down quite deep to this limestone so that they can have an assured water supply. The other great thing about Ebenezer as a sub-region is that there are some fantastic old vines there. So this particular wine is made from vines that some of the youngest are about 30 years old and the oldest are about 120. And these are predominantly bush vines. They're unirrigated, so yields are really quite low, and particularly in 2020 when it was a dry year following on from a previous dry year, and they had some issues with frost cutting down yields at flowering as well. So you've got a really, I think it was about 3 tonnes per hectare in terms of yield, so really quite low. But also, because this part of South Australia has never had phylloxera, these are vines planted on their own roots. So this is a very sort of natural, low input approach to viticulture, really. The wines are hand harvested. They go into 1 tonne open fermenters where they go through quite a long maceration to try and gently pull out as much of the tannin as possible. So it's 100% Shiraz, and then it's aged in oak. About 90% of that is French oak and 10% is American oak. It stays in these barrels which are hogsheads, so slightly larger than barrique, 300 plus litres. And I think about 40% of that is new oak, and the balance is second and third fill. So you've got a fair oak influence, certainly a little bit of American oak coming in there, but older oak. And as I say, that ages for 16 months, so that's quite a fair amount of time there. But with such concentrated fruit, that will hopefully take that. So the first thing to do is to look at the colour, and there's a lovely intensity of the colour here. There's a brightness. The rim has a vibrant ruby note, but it's a sort of a dark, opaque, black ruby colour. As I swirl, there are some tears forming on the edge of the glass. It's hardly surprising. This is a wine that's at 14.5% alcohol and should have plenty of tannin as well. So there's lots of vinosity there to cling to the edge of the glass. So let's have a taste. I should have commented on the aromas, but I think the aromas are very much in line with the palate there. You've got a wonderful sort of rich red fruit, but with a quite spicy, slightly cedary note. So there are peppery notes, and then there are these lovely sort of cedar, perhaps a little bit of vanilla as well, exotic spices on the finish coming from the oak, and they're beautifully married in with the fruit. Actually, they don't stand out. They're not drying. There's a little bit of grip to them, but they're not astringent. So yes, there's a lovely cedary note, but the fruit that started off being sort of this juicy red mulberry, red plum, sort of quite concentrated fruit, very ripe, starts to take on more of a savoury note towards the finish. There's a slight meatiness. There's a black olive note to it. And I think some of that is a little bit of the oak cutting in there as well. There aren't particularly overripe notes to it. The ripeness is a nice, fresh, red fruit, deep, concentrated mulberry sort of note. It's not spilling over to a dark licorice note there. As I say, you've got those more savoury black olive sort of notes in there as well, but there's enough acidity to lift that lovely red fruit at the beginning of the wine there. In terms of the wine structure, it could perhaps soften and marry a little more, but actually I quite like the fact that you've got this fairly clean cedary note coming through. I mean, I think this is a wine for the long term. If you wanted to sell it for 10 years, it would repay that. I think you'd get extra complexity, you'd get extra smoothness from this. But at the same time, it's a wine that's very accessible now, with a sort of a juicy, fresh, sort of quite bloody, maybe steak or something like that. This would work beautifully. It would bring out the sort of the black fruit here, the sort of, there'd be black cherry, elderberry, maybe even cassis notes coming out there before the sort of the more savoury notes as well. But I think it'd be a lovely combination. This is a relatively powerful wine, but it's not overblown, it's not a blockbuster. It has some elegance and some freshness that really sort of gives it that sort of liveliness, and I suspect will help it to age. So that was Glaetzer's The Bishop, and the 2020 vintage of that by Ben Glaetzer. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you find the videos interesting. Do please follow us on YouTube. Do please leave your comments. But do please also make sure you join us again soon, won't you? Goodbye now.